They gave her to him like a broken toy, and they expected him to laugh. The grand hall of Baron Vorexx's palace shimmered with cruel opulence. A ceiling carved from meteor crystal caught the twin suns above, scattering prismatic light over a sea of alien nobility. Perfumed with pungent spice clouds and echoing with smug laughter, it was a place where cruelty masqueraded as ceremony. Commander Ryland stood alone on the obsidian dais, still bleeding through the cracks of his battle-scorched armor, human, scarred, victorious, a man who had led flesh and fire through impossible odds and turned the tide of a war no one thought humanity could win. Now, he stood surrounded by those who once deemed his kind primitive, disposable. Baron Vorexx descended from his obsidian throne like a beast satisfied with its meal. Towering and molten gold-skinned, his smile was a predator's grin. "For your contributions to our great cause, Commander Ryland," the Baron purred, "we offer a gesture of gratitude." A hush fell. Then came the sound of chains dragging. 2 guards hauled forward a shrouded figure. Thin, trembling, head bowed under the weight of her own existence. They dropped her at Ryland's feet like a sack of malfunctioning tech. With a dramatic flourish, Vorexx gestured. "My daughter." The court gasped, then laughed. Harsh, metallic, merciless. "She was born broken," the Baron declared. "Mute, paralyzed, useless. But perhaps," he said with mock sympathy, "a silent companion is perfect for a brute who knows only war." More laughter, louder now, echoing through the chamber like gunfire. Ryland didn't move. Not at first. He stared down at the girl. Her skin was a shimmering twilight blue, bruised in places. Silver hair spilled across her face like torn silk. Her eyes, gods, her eyes. Wide, clear, terrified, and terribly aware. Not empty, not vacant, watching. And something in them stopped him cold. The Baron's voice slithered on. "No need to thank me, Commander. She requires no feeding, no conversation, no opinion. Just a corner and a chain." Ryland's jaw clenched. Without a word, he stepped forward. The room fell silent. He knelt beside her. Gently, he lifted her chin, forcing her gaze to meet his. "Can you hear me?" he whispered. No response. But her breath quickened. Her pupils shrank. She blinked once, slowly. Ryland stood. His voice, when it came, was iron wrapped in ice. "I accept your gift." The Baron smirked. "But not as a trophy. Not as a joke." Ryland turned, cloak billowing behind him. "She is now under my protection." The silence cracked. Then came a low murmur, confusion, discomfort. Vorexx's sneer twisted. "You mistake my generosity for charity, Commander. She is broken. She is nothing." "No," Ryland said, lifting the woman carefully into his arms. "She is someone, and from now on, she matters." With that, he turned his back on the Baron, on the laughter, on the jeering crowds, and carried her out of the hall like a warrior rescuing a sacred artifact, not a prize, but a promise. The silence in his quarters was louder than the jeers he had left behind. Commander Ryland paced the smooth floor of the medical chamber, glancing back at the blue-skinned woman now resting on the recovery couch. She lay still, fragile, voiceless, unmoving, but not gone. No, he had seen it in her eyes back in that wretched hall. She was there, buried beneath whatever cruel prison her body had become. The medics called it a waste of resources. The officers called it a sympathy stunt. Even his own men, the few who remained loyal after the war, whispered behind closed doors. Why him? Why her? What's the point? But Ryland didn't care, because she blinked. That moment, that one slow blink in the middle of a room filled with monsters, was more than proof. It was a cry. A flare shot through a black sky, and he was the only one who saw it. He moved methodically, converting half his quarters into a makeshift care facility. She needed comfort, safety. More than that, she needed someone who believed. The outpost's main AI, MARA, offered limited assistance. Subject exhibits no significant cognitive response, it reported. Ryland muted it. He sat beside her every day, read to her, spoke to her, told her about Earth, about the way rain smells after summer heat, about old music that made people cry without knowing why. He brought her art from human colonies, placed flowers by her bedside, not for decoration, but for life. So she knew this wasn't a cage. Not again. And slowly, she began to respond. Not much, just subtle shifts at first. Her breathing changed when certain stories reached their climax. Her eyes followed light. One night, as he described a near-death mission on the sulfur plains of Thurnus Prime, a tear slipped down her cheek. He caught it with his thumb and smiled. You're still in there. But outside those walls, doubt thickened like smoke. They're mocking you, said Captain Dolik, one of the few higher-ranked officers left in the fleet. You've lost credibility, Ryland. You're risking your future for a statue. Ryland didn't look away from the woman resting nearby. She's not a statue. You don't even know if she can think. He turned then, calm, cold. I do know. The conversation ended. He began studying alien neurology, something the war left little time for. He scoured databanks, contacted outposts, even reached out to xenobiologists who once refused to work with humans. Some replied. Most ignored him. The ones who did respond? They laughed. Paralysis and mutism from birth? There's no higher function. You're anthropomorphizing. Ryland ignored them all. He wasn't projecting. He was watching. He saw her respond to pain, music, light, and sometimes to him. Late one night, after reading aloud from an old Terran novel, he asked, "Can you hear me?" Nothing. He smiled. "I know you can." She blinked. Not a reflex. A response. He started documenting everything. Her eye movements, facial tension, breath rate fluctuations. He charted patterns, time-stamped responses, created neural maps based on his amateur observations. It wasn't much, but it was something. And sometimes, something is all a person needs to keep fighting. One evening, as the stars unfurled over the alien skyline and Ryland cleaned the delicate monitor cuffs from her wrists, he paused. "I don't care what they think," he said quietly. "I don't care if the whole damn galaxy laughs at me. I saw you." She stared back, eyes deep as gravity wells. He leaned in, voice steady. "I don't leave people behind, especially not when they're still fighting." And just for a second, something flickered behind her gaze, like lightning beneath water. Ryland didn't sleep anymore. He dozed. Between scans, between data logs, between the soft clicks of the monitors that tracked the alien woman's breath. Weeks had passed since he'd carried her out of the Baron's throne room. Weeks of small signs, subtle movements, quiet defiance against the silence that had caged her for a lifetime. But tonight felt different. He could sense it, like the air before a storm. Her eyes were open, alert beneath long silver lashes, watching him again. Not with fear now, but expectation. He rolled his chair closer and held up a small device, sleek, silver, the size of a coin. It was the prototype he'd been building with help from an old Terran AI linguist and a rogue xenoneural engineer. A simple interface tuned to track eye movement and converted into basic responses. Crude, imperfect, but a beginning. He clipped the translator gently onto her temple. "If you understand me," he said softly, "I want you to look left." She stared at him. Then, slowly, deliberately, her pupils shifted left. The machine beeped. The display pulsed. Left. Ryland froze, his breath caught in his chest. "Now right." Her gaze shifted again. "Right." He laughed, not out of joy, but release. Weeks of doubt uncoiled from his chest like 1,000 knots unraveling all at once. He leaned forward, eyes stinging. "You're in there. You've been in there this whole time." She blinked, once, twice, as if to say, "Of course." He swallowed hard and tapped the final prompt. The screen changed to 2 words. "Yes." "No." He met her gaze. "Can you understand me?" A pause, a heartbeat. Then her eyes moved, unshaking, sure, toward yes. The machine pinged, glowing softly. "Yes." Ryland's vision blurred. He dropped to his knees beside her, took her hand, cold, still, but real. "You're not lost," he whispered. "You're not broken. You're still you." A tear slipped down her cheek, and Ryland, the soldier hardened by war, bowed his head beside a woman who had never spoken a word to him, and cried like a child, because for the first time since the war ended, he had something worth fighting for. After yes, everything changed, not in grand, sweeping ways, but in thousands of small, quiet shifts, the kind that built something sacred without anyone noticing. Until one day, it simply was. Ryland had known war. He'd known fury, command, loss. But this strange, slow unfolding of trust between two souls separated by biology, culture, trauma, and silence. This was something else entirely. It demanded a different kind of strength, and he gave it without question. Each morning began the same. He would greet her with a soft, "Good morning," even if she couldn't reply. Then came the rituals, checking vitals, adjusting the translator headset, reviewing her responsiveness logs. But it wasn't just about monitoring anymore. It was about being there, creating a rhythm, a presence, a bond. And she responded, not with words, but in every way that mattered. When Ryland played music, her eyes tracked the melody like it was something living. She would blink slowly at the rise of strings, widen her eyes at deep percussion, and once, when he played a Terran lullaby sung in an extinct dialect, a tear slipped quietly down her cheek. So, he played more. Classical, folk, alien compositions from allied species. She liked the ones with harmonics layered like rainfall, sounds that wrapped around the soul and made silence feel full, not empty. He read to her too. Ancient Terran stories, mythologies, poetry, and she remembered them. When he referenced a line from earlier in the week, she blinked twice. Yes, I remember. Yes, I liked it. It became their secret language. 2 blinks meant yes. 1 slow blink, no. 3 fast, tell me more. He started to write whole stories just for her, short tales where the hero was a silver-haired girl trapped in a tower of glass and a lone mechanic who taught her to see stars from inside her cage. When he read those, she would stare at him longer, sometimes blinking once, sometimes not at all, sometimes just watching him breathe. He brought her color, art kits from Earth, digital painting slates from Electra 7, tactile texture panels used in alien therapy. He'd guide her fingers, gently moving her hand across surfaces, waiting for the flick of her gaze to choose between red or blue, swirl or splash. Over weeks, they created something together, a wall-sized mural filled with abstract streaks of color, eyes, stars, hands, and circles. It made her medical chamber feel alive. And sometimes, Ryland would catch her looking at it long after the session ended, like she was remembering what it meant to make something. Not just exist. He taught her about Earth, not just data, but feelings. What snow tasted like when it melted on your tongue, how fireworks rumbled in your chest on the 4th of July, how terrible cafeteria coffee was at Academy Barracks. She seemed to enjoy that one. He also told her about his sister. She had died during the first years of the war. He spoke quietly, hands clenched, voice soft. "She was like you," he said once. Not broken, just unseen. And when he looked at the woman beside him, she blinked slowly, like she understood. The outpost remained silent about them, a few snide jokes, some radio silence. But Ryland didn't care. He wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. He just wanted her to feel human, whatever that meant to her. Then came the turning point. He'd been reading her a story, one of his own inventions. A tale of a starship lost in a timefold, with a crew held together only by hope. At the climax, he paused to ask, "Did you like it?" She blinked twice, then paused, then blinked 3 times. Fast. "Tell me more." He smiled so wide it hurt. "You got it." That night, as he dimmed the lights and prepared to leave, he heard a faint mechanical ping from her translator. He turned. The display flickered. "Thank you." He froze. She'd never initiated a message before. He walked back slowly, sat beside her, took her hand. "You're welcome," he whispered. "Always." In the dim amber light of the chamber, 2 people sat together, human and alien, soldier and soul survivor, with no language, no tradition, just moments, just them. And between them, the gap of species, war, and silence was closing, breath by breath. It happened on a Thursday. There was nothing special about the day. No cosmic alignment, no miracle sunrise. Just the hum of the outpost, the quiet rhythm of routine, and the sound of Ryland's voice as he read from a book she'd chosen days before. "And when the starlight touched the mountain," he read softly, "even the stone began to remember the sky." He glanced at her. She was watching him, as always, eyes steady, present, listening. Then, as he reached for a page-turner, something shifted. A flicker, so small he nearly missed it. Her hand, her right hand curled beneath the thermal blanket, moved. Just a twitch, a tremble in her fingers, but deliberate, alive. "Wait," Ryland whispered. He dropped the book, leaning in, not blinking. "Do that again," he said, gently, desperately. "If you can, do it again." Her brow tensed slightly. He saw it. A war being fought behind her eyes, muscles long atrophied, screaming in protest. Then, her index finger twitched, curled. A second time. This wasn't a spasm. This wasn't random. This was her. Ryland laughed, and it cracked, raw and ragged with disbelief. "You did it," he whispered. "You moved." He fell to his knees beside her bed, gripping the edge like it might anchor him to reality. "You moved, and it was you." Her eyes filled with something electric, fierce, afraid, but proud. Then her translator pinged. Pain. "Okay," he said quickly. "Okay, no more for now. Just breathe. You're okay." He reached for her hand, holding it between both of his. It was trembling, and he wasn't sure if it was hers or his. The next hours were chaos, but a beautiful kind. M-A-R-A, the station A-I, confirmed neuromuscular response. The med scans showed faint but undeniable reactivation of voluntary motor control. Dr. Elar, the neurotech Ryland had practically bribed to consult, stared at the readouts in disbelief. "This isn't possible," she muttered. "She's been inert for years. There's no model for this level of cognitive recovery." "She's not a model," Ryland said, smiling. "She's a person." From that moment, everything intensified. The training protocols, the therapy schedules. Ryland constructed custom modules that stimulated reflexes, muscle memory, nerve pathways, pushing just enough, never too much, and always, always with her consent. "Are you ready?" he would ask. "Yes." Always. Yes. Her progress was slow, painful, but it was theirs. Ryland never missed a session, not when his leg cramped from kneeling, not when his voice gave out from reading aloud for hours, not even when political emissaries from the Baron returned, demanding updates. He ignored them. There was only her. The breakthrough changed something between them. She no longer just listened. She participated. She chose which music played, which stories he read, which exercises to repeat. She began asking him questions through the translator. "Your scar?" it asked one night. Ryland blinked. He glanced at the long white line running from his neck to his shoulder. "Knife," he said simply. "Battle of Redreach. Hurt like hell." "You survived." He smiled. "So did you." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. They added one more word to the device. Trust. And after each session, before she rested, she would hover her gaze over that word. Every single time. That Thursday began like any other. It ended with a woman who once couldn't move a finger, clutching his hand in hers, shaking, weak, but there. And Ryland, who had fought wars on worlds without names, found himself undone by a single trembling touch, the kind of touch that moved stars. Ryland never asked for thanks. He didn't need recognition, or medals, or monuments. He'd had enough of those for a lifetime, and they'd never filled the emptiness war left behind. But when her fingers had curled around his hand, when she'd held onto him, weak but willing, he felt something shift inside his chest. Not a victory, a vow. She moved more often now. Slowly, carefully, with effort and a trace of pride. Her hand could grasp things for a few seconds at a time. Her neck had begun to turn. He'd catch her glancing toward the window at sunrise, just as the second sun crested over the ridge. Her lips twitched occasionally, like they were remembering the shape of words. She hadn't spoken. Not yet. But the silence no longer felt like absence. It felt like potential. Ryland adjusted their routine. It was no longer about recovery. It was about living. They added shared meals. He cooked. Badly. She found it funny, or so he assumed from the way her gaze lingered longer on his face each time he winced from a failed recipe. She preferred sweet things. He learned quickly to keep honey fruits stocked. He played her old Terran romance vids. At first, just background noise. But when a character confessed love under starlight and she blinked 3 times fast, "Tell me more." He knew she was listening. She liked stories where people didn't save the world, but saved each other. So he told her real ones. Stories from his past, from the war, from Earth. The day he got his first ship. The time his sister tried to cut his hair and gave him a reverse mohawk. He'd laugh. She would watch. Sometimes she'd reach out just barely, her hand brushing his sleeve. Not for help, for connection. One night, while the outpost slept and stars spilled across the dome, he sat beside her, tired, but peaceful. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted. She blinked once, curious. "I mean this." He gestured around the room, to her, to himself. "None of this was part of my plan." Another blink. He smiled. "But I think it's better." She moved her fingers slightly. Then, after a pause, her translator beeped. "Why?" He looked at her. Really looked. "Because I spent most of my life learning how to protect people," he said softly. "But no one ever taught me how to stay." Silence. Then, "You stay." He swallowed. "Yeah," he said. "I do." Her progress wasn't linear. Some days were frustrating. Her muscles would lock. Her control would waver. She'd shake or flinch or cry without sound. But Ryland never pushed. On those days, he simply held her hand, read quietly, played music. On one particularly bad morning, she trembled so violently she knocked her cup off the table. The noise startled her. Ryland caught it midair and set it down. She blinked quickly, furiously, apologetic. He shook his head. "You don't have to be sorry," he said. "You're learning. That's enough." Still broken, came the slow response. "No," he said gently. "Not broken. Becoming." They started going outside. At first, just to the landing platform at twilight, where the breeze was soft and the moons hung low. He brought a blanket, wrapped it around her, and sat beside her in silence. She stared at the sky like she was memorizing it. After a while, she asked, "Your name?" He blinked. "You don't know?" "Never asked." He chuckled. "Ryland. Commander Ryland Thorne." A pause. Then, "Ryland." Her first spoken word came weeks later. It wasn't dramatic. They were sitting on the floor, beside the mural, fingers covered in paint. He had smeared red across his cheek by accident. She watched him fumble with the color pad, amused. And then, barely audible but real, she whispered, "Ryland." He dropped the brush. She looked startled, like she didn't mean to say it. He didn't speak. He just reached for her hand and held it. No tears. No drama. Just that word, spoken once, and the world shifted around them. That night, he gave her something small. A mirror. Cracked. Worn. Salvaged from a wreck years ago. "This was all I had when I thought I was done," he told her. "I used to look in it and wonder if I was still me." She stared at her reflection. Her silver hair was longer now. Her skin held more color. Her shoulders, though still fragile, didn't look broken anymore. She touched the glass. Then her eyes moved to him. "Thank you," he smiled. "Not for what you are," he said, "but for who you're becoming." It began with her toes, a single flicker beneath the blanket. Small, twitchy, uncertain. But Ryland noticed it immediately. His eyes snapped to her foot, waiting, holding his breath. "Was that you?" he asked, kneeling at her side. She blinked once, yes. He grinned. "Okay, let's see where this goes." Over the following days, the progress came fast and fierce, like a dam breaking inside her. The neural reconnections were erratic but promising. Her legs, long dormant, began responding to basic stimuli. Ryland built a suspended support harness in the rehab bay, secured with soft bands and adaptive cushions. It was crude, but safe. The first time he carried her into the frame, her body tensed like a coiled spring. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're not falling. I've got you." She blinked twice, ready. And so they began. The sessions were grueling. Her muscles trembled under the weight of memory. Each movement was like dragging galaxies through molasses. Sweat purled on her brow. Her jaw clenched in silence. But every time she faltered, Ryland was there. Hands steady. Voice gentle. Never pushing, just waiting. "You don't have to rush," he'd remind her. "This is your pace." And she would blink. Once, slow and determined, and try again. Then came the day he didn't lift her. Instead, he waited. She looked at him, confused. "No harness today," he said. "Just me, just you." He crouched, arms at the ready, a breath away. "Try." For a moment, nothing moved. Then, slowly, achingly, her knees engaged. Her hands pushed against the frame. Her arms trembled. Her body rose. Not far, not fast, but enough. Her feet touched the ground and held. Ryland didn't speak. He didn't dare break the moment. She swayed slightly, then straightened. Her eyes lifted to meet his. He saw it there. Not fear, not pain. Resolve. Then her translator pinged. Standing. Ryland exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, and smiled, voice shaking. "Yeah, you are." The doors to the throne room opened with a hiss like a dying star. They had not been summoned. They did not ask for permission. They walked in anyway. Ryland at her side, silent and armored, the steady weight of his presence a shield against the storm he knew was coming, and her, standing, not leaning, not carried, standing, wrapped in a flowing mantle of soft silver and midnight blue, her silver hair falling down her back like moonlight. She moved forward on her own legs, each step careful, deliberate, but powerful. The hall grew quieter with each one. The nobles stared. The Baron, seated atop his obsidian throne, narrowed his glowing eyes. "You dare return," he growled, voice echoing like steel dragged across stone. She didn't flinch. Ryland didn't speak. She stepped forward alone, translator device affixed behind her ear. Voice still silent, but not mute. Not anymore. "I return," the device said clearly, translating the flicker of her eyes, the lift of her brow. "Not as your possession," she paused, "but as your consequence." The air shifted. Tension coiled like wire about to snap. The Baron rose, towering and incandescent with fury. "You were a gift, a symbol of shame. You made me a joke," she replied, "and I became a storm." Gasps echoed around the chamber. A few dared to stand. Most just watched, spellbound, afraid. "You think this changes anything?" the Baron sneered. "You are one body, one voice, one moment." Ryland finally spoke. "That's all revolutions need." The Baron laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. She raised her hand, slow, shaking, but certain, and activated the hologram on her wrist. Images exploded into the air, her in the cage, her trembling on the floor, her fingers moving, her standing, the mural, the stars. Ryland beside her. The moment she said his name, the room went silent, not in disbelief, in awe. "You wanted silence," she said, "but I found my voice." Her eyes locked on her father's. "And now, the world will hear it." They didn't crown her. There was no coronation, no throne, no anthem echoing through the halls. And that was exactly how she wanted it. After the Baron's fall, a council was formed. Voices from every district, alien and human alike, stood in a circle, not a pyramid. Decisions were debated, not dictated, and at the center of that quiet storm was her. Not because she sought power, because people trusted the woman who had crawled through silence and came out with fire in her eyes. She didn't speak much. She didn't need to. She would appear at the forums wrapped in her midnight cloak, silver hair unbound, eyes clear and present. When she nodded, the room leaned in. When she blinked twice, the entire floor would pause. Her words weren't loud. They were remembered. Ryland stayed close, always just a few steps behind. He declined every title offered, turned down every ribbon, every rank. He didn't want to lead. He wanted to witness. One evening, as the twin moons rose and the city below whispered its new song, he stood beside her atop the western balcony. She looked out over the skyline. Then she said quietly, "They keep calling me a symbol, Ryland smiled. You're not. She turned. What am I then? He looked at her, not as the girl who had once been paralyzed, not as a survivor, but simply as someone who endured. You're the woman who just was, he said, and they needed to see it could be done. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. The ship wasn't sleek. It wasn't fast or armed or built to impress. It was patched together from old transport hulls and outdated tech. But it flew, and it was theirs. They called it second breath, not because it was beautiful, but because it was possible. Ryland stood at the helm, hands steady, gaze fixed on the horizon of stars. She sat beside him, her body still learning balance, her fingers resting on the console like they belonged there. Because now, they did. They didn't leave with a mission. No grand speeches. No dramatic cause. They just wanted to see what was out there. And maybe find others who needed what they once did. A second chance. A second breath. They traveled slow, stopping at border worlds, mining colonies, even derelict stations drifting through forgotten sectors. Everywhere they went, people stared. Sometimes in awe, sometimes in disbelief, always with wonder. She never introduced herself with titles. She told stories instead. Stories of cages and stars and silence turned into song. Stories of the human who waited, the alien who rose, the ship built not for war, but for becoming. And people listened. They always did. One evening, as the ship drifted in orbit around a blue-ringed gas giant, Ryland brought out the old cracked mirror. He offered it to her. She took it. This time her hands didn't shake. She looked at herself, then at him. You saved me, she said, voice soft, steady. Ryland smiled. No, he replied. I just stayed long enough for you to save yourself. They watched the stars in silence after that. The universe was vast, but they were ready. And somewhere between the galaxies, a broken girl and a stubborn soldier sailed into the unknown. Not to be legends, but to remind the stars. Sometimes the quietest stories are the ones that last forever.